Synth-Spice Smuggler. Neo-Mumbai rose from the ancient Arabian Sea coastline like a fevered dream of glass and steel, a city that defied the very concept of a horizon. It was a sprawling, vertical metropolis, a collection of colossal arcologies that scraped the perpetually humid, haze-choked sky. Each tower was a self-contained ecosystem, a stratified society where the elite breathed filtered air in the crystalline upper spires, while the vast majority lived in the dense, interconnected mid-levels and the perpetually shadowed, sweat-slicked undersprawl, a chaotic labyrinth of improvised structures, crumbling ferrocrete, and the constant thrum of overworked environmental processors. The air, thick with the scent of recycled humidity, industrial effluvium, and the faint, ever-present tang of nutrient paste, shimmered with holographic advertisements promoting standardized, collective-approved lifestyles. Neo-Mumbai was governed by the syndicate, not a benevolent collective, but a ruthless, shadowy entity whose power was enforced through economic strangulation and technological omnipresence. Their authority flowed from the Onyx Citadel, a fortress-like arcology at the city's geographical heart, its obsidian facades absorbing all light, its summit perpetually wreathed in an ominous, data-rich mist. The syndicate maintained its grip through pervasive biometric surveillance, armed corporate enforcers, and an ironclad monopoly on all essential resources, including food. Natural flavors, spices, and any sensory experiences that hinted at a vibrant, uncontrolled past, were deemed inefficient, culturally disruptive, and, most importantly, unprofitable. The syndicate promoted nutrient pastes and bland, genetically optimized staples, their blandness a testament to their pervasive control. Yet, whispers persisted, carried on the illicit currents of the taste web, an underground network that dealt in rare, synthetic spices that mimicked the flavors of pre-collapse Earth. These weren't just chemicals, they were echoes of a vanished world, sensory bridges to a forgotten heritage that the syndicate sought to erase. To possess one was to hold a fragment of rebellion, a spark of memory that defied the imposed monotony. In the meticulously calibrated kitchens of the Emerald Plate Arcology's mid-levels, in a section dedicated to the bland, efficient production of optimal nutrient loaves for the general populace, worked Anise. She was a young chef, barely into her 20s, with nimble fingers that instinctively understood the subtle dance of flavor, even when working with the collective sterile, predefined ingredients. Her short, dark hair was often pulled back with a practical synth band, and her eyes, a sharp, inquisitive green, missed nothing. Anise was a prodigy of taste in a city that had deliberately forgotten it. She could conjure fleeting notes of roasted vegetable earthiness from a protein block or a hint of citrus zest from a mineral supplement, simply through precise temperature control and molecular rearrangement, feats of alchemy in a world of standardized fare. But her official work, for all its technical brilliance, left her soul aching. She hungered for the vibrant, untamed symphony of true taste, the kind her grandmother, a relic of the before times, who spoke in hushed tones of ginger snap cookies and spicy vindaloo, had whispered about. These whispers fueled her true, dangerous obsession, the illicit trade in rare, synthetic spices that mimicked the flavors of pre-collapse Earth. These were the forbidden fruits of memory, concocted by rogue biochemists and forgotten artisans who scorned the syndicate's bland harmony. Anisa's hidden lab, a marvel of jury-rigged efficiency, was tucked away in a decommissioned thermal vent shaft deep within the Emerald Plate structural skeleton. It hummed with the clandestine energy of repurposed power cells and the intoxicating, complex aroma of forbidden creation, the pungent notes of faux garlic, the sweet warmth of simulated vanilla, the fiery kick of a synthetic chili. Her prized possession, the heart of her operation, was a battered, yet miraculously preserved, flavor weaver, an antique biomolecular synthesizer from the early 21st century, its holographic interface glowing with the ghostly imprints of long-lost molecular structures. It was a relic, a defiant echo of a time when flavor was a pursuit, not a crime. The weaver could analyze trace elements from ancient data chips, rumored to contain pre-collapse recipes, and meticulously reconstruct the complex molecular chains of their defining spices. Anissa's clientele was a clandestine network of fellow, sensory seekers, disillusioned syndicate data miners yearning for genuine sensation, artists whose creative spark felt muted without the full spectrum of sensory input, aging historians desperate for a taste of the past, and even a few high-ranking syndicate officials secretly desperate for a moment of genuine, uncurated sensation, far from the watchful eyes of the Onyx Citadel. Her deliveries were a ballet of shadow and silence. She moved through the city's intricate service conduits, emergency maintenance tunnels, and waste reclamation channels, navigating the neglected undersprawl's humid, echoing depths, her movements honed by years of illicit trade. Her companion in these perilous ventures was not a drone, but a biometric scrambler unit she called Mute. This palm-sized device, integrated seamlessly into her chef's wrist comm, emitted a subtle, multi-frequency pulse that blurred her biometric signature, making her appear as background environmental noise to the syndicate's omnipresent scanners. Mute pulsed with a faint, reassuring warmth against her skin when active, a constant reminder of the fine line she walked between the sterile order above and the chaotic freedom below. The faint, complex scent of her latest creations, a synthetic ginger that tasted of warm sun, a mimic thyme that carried the whisper of an ancient forest, clung to her worn, dark synth fabric, a subtle olfactory signature of her rebellion, a contrast to the clean, sterile air of Neo-Mumbai. The quiet rebellion of the taste web, and Anissa's vital corner within it, was irrevocably shattered by the emergence of whispers, then rumors, then undeniable proof, of a mythical spice, solar saffron. It wasn't just another rare synthetic. It was rumored to be a flavor of unparalleled potency, capable of unlocking deep, long-dormant neural pathways, of triggering a flood of forgotten memories, of sparking an almost violent, overwhelming rush of genuine emotion. It was said to be the pinnacle of pre-collapse flavor mimicry, a taste that transcended mere culinary sensation and became a direct conduit to the past, capable of restoring senses long dulled by the syndicate's control. The demand for solar saffron was immediate and insatiable, creating a frantic scramble within the taste web. Anissa's network, usually a discreet hum of hushed transactions, crackled with desperate inquiries. Clients who had once sought simple pleasures now pleaded for a taste of this legend. The price of even a whisper of solar saffron skyrocketed, distorting the fragile economy of the taste web. Anise, however, felt a profound unease. The sheer potency attributed to solar saffron seemed too good to be true, almost dangerous. While her own synthesized spices offered fleeting glimpses of lost joy, the claims about solar saffron suggested a full, unmediated sensory download, a complete reawakening that could shatter the fragile mental stability of those accustomed to the syndicate's carefully curated reality. Such a powerful substance, if real, would be a direct threat to the syndicate's control, yet its sudden appearance felt orchestrated. Her unease intensified when she intercepted a scrambled data burst on a secure, syndicate-grade channel, a channel far beyond the usual reach of the taste web. Mute, humming urgently on her wrist, struggled to decrypt it, its internal processors overheating. The message was fragmented, riddled with corrupted packets, but two keywords pierced through the digital static: solar saffron and catalyst protocol. The source of the transmission was chillingly clear: the Onyx Citadel, the very heart of syndicate power. Why would the syndicate, an entity that ruthlessly suppressed genuine flavor and memory, be interested in a substance rumored to restore them? The paradox gnawed at Anise. It didn't fit their operational profile. Their methods were about blandness, control, and efficiency, not about reawakening buried senses. The only logical conclusion was that their interest in solar saffron was not to consume it, but to control it. To neutralize it, or, more terrifyingly, to weaponize it. The very next cycle, the fear solidified into terrifying certainty. Syndicate enforcers, not the usual biometric drones, but heavily armed sensory purifiers, in their signature matte black armor, began to raid known taste web hubs. These purifiers were equipped with advanced sensory dampeners, capable of nullifying ambient aromas and even inducing temporary, localized anhedonia, making it impossible for their targets to experience pleasure. They systematically dismantled hidden labs, confiscated illicit flavor weavers, and rounded up known spice dealers, their movements precise and ruthless. The taste web, once a vibrant, clandestine ecosystem, withered under this brutal assault. Anise barely escaped a raid on a neighboring lab, Ghost screaming a warning on her wrist comm as the sensory purifier's dampening field washed over her, making the world feel gray and dull for a terrifying few seconds. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not just from adrenaline, but from a profound, chilling realization. The Syndicate wasn't just cracking down, they were hunting solar saffron. They weren't stopping the trade, they were trying to seize the entire supply. This wasn't about suppressing flavor, it was about monopolizing the ultimate flavor, controlling the very gateway to memory and emotion. Anise knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that whoever controlled solar saffron, controlled the past, and thus, controlled Neo Mumbai's future. The city wasn't just addicted to blandness, it was on the verge of losing its very history, its collective soul, if the Syndicate got its hands on the true solar saffron and twisted its purpose. She had to find it first. She had to understand its true nature. Anise knew she couldn't outfight the Syndicate. Their resources were infinite, their network absolute. Her only weapon was knowledge, and her only ally, the fragmented whispers of a pre-collapse past. The encrypted data burst from the Onyx Citadel, the one mentioning Catalyst Protocol, alongside Solar Saffron, plagued her. The Syndicate wasn't just interested in the spice, they were interested in its effect. And if it was a catalyst, then it suggested a reaction, a deliberate, controlled activation. Her frantic data searches, pushing her antique flavor weaver's processing capabilities to their absolute limit, started yielding faint, tantalizing echoes from the deepest, most corrupted sectors of Neo Mumbai's forgotten public data nets. These were not Syndicate-approved archives, but ghost trails of pre-collapse information, fragments of academic papers, culinary journals, and botanical studies that had somehow escaped the Great Data Purge. They spoke of a peculiar variety of saffron, not just prized for its flavor, but for its unique neurological properties. Its chemical structure, when isolated and amplified, was said to interact directly with the brain's hippocampus, a region critical for memory formation and emotional processing. It was rumored to be a memory potentiator, a natural compound that didn't create memories, but rather, enhanced the retrieval of existing, dormant ones, bringing them to vivid, almost overwhelming, consciousness. The data trails led her, against all Syndicate warnings, to the crumbling, forgotten lower levels of the Archivist Tower, a once grand structure now partially collapsed and sealed off, known colloquially as the Dust Vaults. It was a perilous journey through unstable ferrocrete, rusted ventilation shafts, and choked conduits, the air thick with the acrid scent of decay and the musty odor of ancient paper. Mute pulsed erratically on her wrist, struggling to bypass the archaic, decaying security protocols that still hummed with residual power. Inside the dust vaults, in a labyrinth of decaying shelves filled with physical data slates and forgotten hard drives, lived a figure of legend within the taste web, Remus, a data archivist from the before times, said to have defied the Syndicate's data purges by literally living among the forgotten records. Remus was a frail, wizened figure, his skin a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes milky with age, but still possessing an unnerving clarity. He was surrounded by towering stacks of data slates, ancient hard drives blinking with forgotten information, and dusty holographic projectors casting spectral images of a world long gone. The air around him hummed with the ghosts of information, the forgotten bites of a vibrant past. He wore threadbare, pre-collapse-era garments, and smelled faintly of ozone and ancient plastic. Anise offered him a small vial of her finest synthesized, forest berry, flavor, a burst of complex sweetness and tartness that mimicked a forgotten fruit. Remus's eyes, usually distant, sharpened with a flicker of intense memory. He held the vial, inhaled deeply, and a single, unbidden tear tracked a path through the dust on his cheek. Such a taste, he rasped, his voice a dry whisper, it brings back the childhood, before the Great Purge. He recognized the Catalyst Protocol, the moment Anise mentioned it. His ancient fingers, stained with ink and the grime of forgotten data, moved with surprising speed across a salvaged terminal, its screen flickering with cryptic symbols. "The Syndicate, they found it," Remus muttered, a profound sorrow in his voice. "The solar saffron is no mere spice, child. It is the core component of the reintegration compound, a neurochemical agent developed by a rogue pre-collapse bioengineering collective called the Veritas. They believed humanity needed to fully experience its past, its failures and triumphs, to truly evolve. The reintegration compound was designed to unlock every suppressed memory, every dulled emotion, every forgotten sensory input, forcing a complete, unfiltered reintegration with the past self. He pointed to a flickering holographic schematic on the ancient terminal. "The Catalyst Protocol is the Syndicate's counterprogram. They don't want the reintegration compound released unchecked. It would plunge Neo-Mumbai into chaos, an emotional and historical overload. Their plan is to weaponize it. To invert its function. To turn it from a memory enhancer into a memory extractor and suppressor. They will isolate the pure memory potentiator from the solar saffron, synthesize it on an industrial scale, and use the Catalyst Protocol to selectively erase dangerous memories, specific historical events, or even entire cultural identities from the populace. They will not just dull senses, they will create a perfectly blank, compliant history, erasing any hint of rebellion, any inconvenient truth. Their target, the collective memory of the pre-collapse world, and any current memory of their own tyranny." The chilling truth slammed into Anise. The Syndicate wasn't trying to stop the spice net, they were trying to control history itself. The raids weren't about contraband. They were about securing every last trace of genuine flavor and memory that might awaken a population they intended to fully pacify. Their goal was to create a future where Neo-Mumbai had no past, only the narrative approved by the Syndicate. Remus then revealed the most terrifying detail: the original, pure solar saffron, the true core of the reintegration compound, is not made in labs. It grows. There is a single, ancient, pre-collapse solar saffron garden, hidden deep within the caldera's geological fault lines, a place the Syndicate has been trying to pinpoint for decades. It is the only natural source left. If they find it, and combine it with their Catalyst Protocol, Neo-Mumbai will be lost forever. Its soul erased, its people living a lie. But if we can get there first, if we can unleash the unadulterated reintegration compound, we can flood the network, awaken the city, and offer a choice: truth, or eternal, pleasant oblivion. The sheer weight of this responsibility, the fate of Neo-Mumbai's entire collective consciousness, settled heavily upon Anisa's young shoulders. The scent of a memory, of a future unwritten, now filled the dust vaults. Within the obsidian walls of the Onyx Citadel, atop its highest spire, resided Director Volkov, the undisputed head of the Syndicate. Unlike the public-facing, almost serene figures of previous authorities, Volkov was a being of stark, utilitarian efficiency. His features were sharp, his gaze perpetually calculating, and his voice, when heard through the Citadel's ubiquitous comnet, was a flat, modulated tone that brooked no dissent. He wore no elaborate robes, only a simple, dark synth suit that seemed to blend with the very shadows of his command center. His office, a minimalist chamber of polished dark stone and flickering data screens, lacked any personal effects, a testament to his singular, unyielding focus, the absolute optimization of Neo-Mumbai. Volkov believed that the chaos of choice was humanity's greatest weakness. He saw history as a series of avoidable mistakes, triggered by emotional volatility and individual, irrational decisions. The Syndicate's meticulously engineered system, he argued, eliminated these variables. Their nutrient paste, their structured daily routines, their carefully managed data flows, all were designed to guide the populace towards a perfectly productive, conflict-free existence. The very concept of a pre-collapse Earth, with its unpredictable famines, wars, and social upheavals, was a cautionary tale to him, a testament to the need for absolute, centralized control. The greatest cruelty, Volkov had once calmly stated in a syndicate internal memo, his words echoing in the vast data archives Anise had managed to partially decrypt, is to grant a species the freedom to destroy itself. Our role is to shepherd, to protect, even if that protection requires certain adjustments to perception. His current obsession was the solar saffron. His intelligence network, far more extensive than Anise had imagined, had finally pinpointed the ancient solar saffron garden within the caldera's geological fault lines. It was not just a natural wonder, it was the ultimate key to his grand design, Project Blank Slate. Project Blank Slate was the Syndicate's most ambitious initiative, designed to permanently purge undesirable memories, not just individual ones, but collective societal memories. Volkov intended to harvest the pure memory potentiator from the natural solar saffron, amplify its effects through the catalyst protocol, and then invert its function. Instead of unlocking dormant memories, it would be used to extract and then systematically erase them. Specific historical events, the brutal founding of the Syndicate, the true ecological devastation of the pre-collapse world, the very concept of individual descent, could be targeted and dissolved from the collective consciousness. The city would live in a perpetual present, its past a clean, Syndicate-approved narrative, its future endlessly pliable. This freedom that these sensory seekers crave, Volkov mused, his voice devoid of anger, merely a detached scientific observation, as his holographic projection hovered over a detailed map of the solar saffron garden's location. It is a delusion. It is weakness. We will remove it, at the root. His words were cold, cutting like a surgical laser. Just as Anise and Remus were formulating their plan, a wave of Syndicate enforcers descended on the dust vaults. The ancient security systems Remus had so carefully maintained finally buckled under the sustained assault. The air filled with the clang of synth armor, the hum of energy weapons, and the chilling silence of sensory purifiers. Remus, sensing the inevitable, thrust a single, ancient, crystalline data shard into Anise's hand. This is the true recipe for the reintegration compound, the antidote, he whispered, his eyes wide with desperate urgency. Combined with pure solar saffron, unleashed into the Syndicate's distribution network, it might just break their hold. But you must hurry. They are already mobilizing. As the enforcers breached their final defenses, Remus enacted a scorched earth protocol, collapsing a section of the dust vaults, sacrificing himself to buy Anise precious minutes. Remember the taste, Anise, his voice echoed, swallowed by the roar of collapsing ferrocrete and the crackle of energy weapons. Remember what it means to feel. Anise fled, ghost screaming warnings on her wrist, the ancient data shard clutched tightly in her hand. The scent of ozone and the dust of forgotten history filled her lungs, mingling with the bitter taste of fear and the fierce resolve to honor Remus's sacrifice. She was no longer just a chef. She was the last, desperate hope for Neo Mumbai's collective memory, a young woman armed only with the ghosts of forgotten flavors and the terrifying knowledge of the Syndicate's ultimate plan. The fate of an entire city's soul rested on her ability to reach the solar saffron garden before Volkov. The journey to the solar saffron garden was a desperate race against time and the Syndicate's relentless pursuit. Anise, guided by the fragmented maps on Remus's data shard and Mute's constant recalculations, navigated the treacherous depths of the caldera's geological fault lines, a forbidden zone, deemed unstable and off-limits by the Syndicate. This was not the orderly undersprawl she knew, but a raw, untamed world of ancient rock formations, subterranean rivers, and pockets of geothermal vents that hissed with superheated steam. The air grew progressively warmer, humid, and smelled faintly of sulfur and damp earth, a primal scent alien to Neo Mumbai's recycled atmosphere. The Syndicate was already mobilizing. Anise saw their ground-scan drones, larger and more robust than the surveillance hummingbirds, sweeping the lower levels, their powerful lights cutting through the gloom. Above, the rhythmic thrum of heavy-duty transport vehicles, ferrying sensory purifiers, echoed through the vast caverns, growing steadily louder. Volkov wasn't leaving anything to chance. Anissa's chef's agility, usually employed in the precise movements of plating or the delicate manipulation of molecular compounds, was now put to a brutal test. She scaled crumbling rock faces, rappelled down sheer drops using improvised synth rope, and squeezed through narrow, geological fissures that threatened to crush her. Mute, working overtime, not only scrambled her biometric signature but also highlighted unstable rockfalls and dangerous steam vents, guiding her through the volatile terrain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of desperate scrambling, the oppressive darkness of the fault lines began to lighten, diffused by an ethereal, golden glow. The air changed, becoming incredibly warm, humid, and infused with an aroma unlike anything Anise had ever synthesized, a complex, intoxicating blend of honeyed sweetness, earthy warmth, and a sharp, almost electric tang that seemed to vibrate directly in her mind. It was the scent of pure, natural solar saffron. The solar saffron garden was not a manicured plot, but a subterranean oasis, a pocket of thriving pre-collapse life in the heart of Neo Mumbai's engineered existence. Thousands of delicate, luminescent saffron flowers, their stigmas glowing with an intense, pulsating golden light, carpeted the ground around a small, crystalline pool fed by a hidden geothermal spring. The pool shimmered with raw, unfiltered data, ancient streams of information that coalesced around the saffron, feeding its unique properties. This was the source of the reintegration compound, the wellspring of true memory. The air here was so thick with the saffron's potent aroma that Anise felt a wave of dizziness, followed by a dizzying rush of sensations, fleeting images of her grandmother's kitchen, the smell of genuine, burnt sugar, the sound of laughter that vibrated with untamed joy. But the syndicate was already there. A squad of sensory purifiers, their matte black armor stark against the saffron's golden glow, were methodically harvesting the delicate stigmas, their specialized tools carefully extracting the luminous threads. Overseeing them was a stern, augmented syndicate bioengineer, their face a cold mask of concentration. They had arrived only minutes before Anise. "Stop!" Anise cried, her voice echoing in the cavern, raw with a desperate urgency. The bioengineer turned, their visor reflecting the saffron's light. An anomaly, they stated, their voice a flat, synthesized monotone. "Terminate." The purifiers raised their energy weapons. Anise, with a burst of instinct, hurled her most potent, raw synthetic chili spice, salvaged from a previous raid, into one of the geothermal vents. The heat instantly vaporized the compound, sending a cloud of potent capsaicin vapor billowing through the cavern. The purifier's sensory dampeners, designed for subtle neural suppression, were overwhelmed by the sheer, unadulterated sensory assault. They recoiled, their visors flashing red, their movements becoming erratic. "You fools," the bioengineer shouted, coughing, struggling against the burning sensation. "You're compromising the harvest." Anise used the momentary distraction. She lunged for the crystalline pool, the source of the saffron's power. She connected Remus's data shard to her flavor weaver, which she had strapped to her back, its ancient circuits humming frantically. The weaver's holographic interface flickered to life, displaying the complex molecular structure of the reintegration compound. She plunged the weaver's intake nozzle into the shimmering pool, drawing in the raw, memory-rich liquid that fed the solar saffron. "Mute," she commanded, her voice strained. "Override syndicate frequencies. Flood the network. Activate the reintegration compound. Full spectrum." Mute, responding to the urgency, began to broadcast, not a simple signal, but the complex biodigital signature of the reintegration compound, amplified by the weaver's power and infused with the raw data from the solar saffron pool. The signal pulsed through Neo Mumbai's vast, interwoven data nets, a counterfrequency that clashed violently with the syndicate's rigid catalyst protocol. As the reintegration compound began to spread, a wave of profound, disorienting sensation washed over the sensory purifiers. Their movements became sluggish, then erratic. One purifier dropped their weapon, their armored hand instinctively reaching up to touch their visor, as if trying to wipe away an unseen tear. Another stood frozen, their head tilted, as if listening to a distant, forgotten melody. The bioengineers stared at their own hand, a look of profound, horrifying recognition dawning on their face, a flicker of raw emotion, fear, regret, memory, breaking through their controlled composure. They were remembering. Director Volkov's cold, calculated voice suddenly boomed through the cavern, amplified by the purifier's communities, laced with a rare, chilling fury. Stop this. This is unacceptable. The network is destabilizing. Project Blank Slate is being compromised. Initiate full system purge. Purge all anomalies. Anise ignored him. She was feeding the Weaver, watching the golden liquid glow as it amplified the reintegration compound. The pure, unadulterated scent of solar saffron, now amplified by the Weaver, filled the cavern, a heady, overwhelming fragrance that promised both revelation and chaos. She felt the tremor in the very foundations of Neo-Mumbai, not from physical destruction, but from the shattering of a carefully constructed illusion. The truth of feeling, the raw, beautiful, terrifying chaos of uncurated memory, was about to wash over the city. As the reintegration compound, amplified by Anisa's ancient flavor weaver and broadcast by Mute, flooded Neo-Mumbai's pervasive datanets, the syndicate's iron grip on the city's collective consciousness began to shatter. It wasn't an explosion, but a profound, disorienting unraveling. Director Volkov's voice, amplified throughout the city by compromised public comm systems, became increasingly erratic, filled with static and glitches, as his control over the network dissolved. Compromised. All units, neutralize. The Catalyst protocol is failing. This is chaos. Unacceptable. His final words were swallowed by a wave of digital noise, then a profound silence. Across Neo-Mumbai, the effect was immediate and deeply personal. Citizens, who had lived their lives in a state of carefully curated sensory and emotional blandness, suddenly experienced a surge of unmediated reality. The ubiquitous holographic ads, usually projecting images of serene faces and standardized contentment, began to glitch violently, flickering through chaotic sequences of raw, unfiltered images, a street riot from a forgotten epoch, a child's unscripted laughter, a couple embracing with unguarded passion, the stark reality of ecological devastation. People froze in the streets, their movements once fluid and efficient, now halting, uncertain. Their faces, once masks of passive contentment, contorted with a bewildering array of emotions. A technician in the hydroponic spires, whose life had been a precise rhythm of nutrient regulation, suddenly dropped his data slate, his eyes wide with a profound, terrifying sadness, as a flood of forgotten grief for a lost family member overwhelmed him. In the Gastronoma district, chefs accustomed to bland nutrient paste collapsed, weeping as the overwhelming, complex aroma of an ancient, pre-collapse curry, a taste they'd never experienced, yet now remembered, flooded their senses. A syndicate enforcer, mid-patrol, suddenly stumbled, their hand reaching for their visor, their body shaking with a profound, almost painful rush of nostalgia for a childhood pet they'd been programmed to forget. The city's automated systems, designed for predictable populations, buckled under the influx of truly free will and raw emotion. Public transports veered off predetermined routes, guided by a sudden, irrational whim of their passengers. Market demands fluctuated wildly, creating unexpected shortages and surges as citizens suddenly remembered a craving for chocolate or coffee that had been purged from their desires. The efficient flow of recycled air in the arcologies became uneven, occasionally carrying faint, alien scents from newly awakened sensory memories. Anise, back in the relative safety of her undersprawl lab, watched the cities unraveling through her salvaged community, Mute vibrating with chaotic data streams. The scent of pure solar saffron, harvested from the garden and still permeating her lab, was overwhelming. She had not only unleashed the reintegration compound but, in doing so, had created a direct, unmediated link between the living essence of the solar saffron and the collective consciousness of Neo-Mumbai. Every citizen, through the very air they breathed and the residual signals in the network, was now subtly connected to the source of pure memory. The silence from the Onyx Citadel was deafening. Director Volkov's fate was unknown, but his control had been broken. The sensory purifiers, those soulless enforcers of blandness, were now scattered throughout the city, grappling with their own reawakened emotions, some overwhelmed, others showing flashes of defiance, even rebellion. The city was not in physical chaos from destruction, but from the overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying freedom of feeling and memory. The bland hum of predetermined destiny had given way to a cacophony of infinite possibilities, a symphony of raw, unedited human experience. The clean, sterile air of Neo-Mumbai was now permeated with the ghost sense of a forgotten world, mingled with the present, unfiltered aromas of fear, elation, confusion, and hope. The Great Unraveling, as it became known, was just the beginning. Neo-Mumbai did not descend into anarchy. Instead, it stumbled into a profound, messy, and ultimately exhilarating journey of self-discovery. The immediate aftermath was a period of intense disorientation. The Syndicate, their control shattered by the sudden re-emergence of collective memory, effectively dissolved. The Onyx Citadel became a silent, brooding monument to a failed utopia. Without the Catalyst protocol to enforce blandness, the vast network of automated systems, designed for a compliant populace, began to falter, requiring direct human intervention, humans who were now struggling to relearn what it meant to make independent choices. Anise, no longer just a young chef or a smuggler, found herself thrust into an unexpected, vital leadership role. Her understanding of taste, of how flavors resonated with memory and emotion, became an indispensable tool for healing a city overwhelmed by its own past. She established sensory reclamation centers in repurposed nutrient paste factories and abandoned data nodes across the city. These were vibrant, chaotic, sometimes tearful spaces where citizens could come to process the relentless deluge of information and emotion. Anisa's flavor weaver, now a symbol of reawakened senses, became a central tool. She used it not just to synthesize spices, but to create emotional anchors, subtle flavor profiles designed to help people ground themselves amidst the flood of new sensations. A carefully crafted synthetic lavender might soothe a panicked mind, a hint of peppermint might clear confusion, a dash of rosemary might help focus fragmented thoughts. She didn't dictate emotions, she merely offered tools for navigating them. Her network, the former taste web, transformed. Former sensory seekers, now fully awakened, became memory guides, sharing their experiences, helping others understand the spectrum of feelings they were rediscovering. Syndicate data miners, once tasked with tracking compliance, now used their skills to explore the vast, unpurged data nets, helping citizens reconstruct their personal histories, finding lost family photos, old stories, forgotten cultural practices. The very sensory purifiers who had once pursued Anise now sought her guidance, struggling to reconcile their past actions with their re-emergent consciences. The solar saffron garden became a sacred site, carefully tended not for harvest, but as a living monument to the power of memory. Its ethereal glow permeated the geological fault lines, a constant reminder of the depth of existence. The scent of solar saffron, subtle now, but ever-present, became the defining aroma of the new Neo-Mumbai, a blend of ancient earthiness and electric possibility. Neo-Mumbai embarked on a long, arduous journey of reconstruction, not just of infrastructure, but of its very soul. The gleaming arcologies, once sterile monuments to control, began to reflect the vibrant, unpredictable light of a city grappling with its own unscripted future. The rigid social structures dissolved, replaced by organic, community-led initiatives. Artists, no longer bound by syndicate aesthetics, unleashed a torrent of raw, powerful creations, exploring the newly rediscovered spectrum of human experience. Chefs, like Anise, pioneered a new culinary movement, blending the rediscovered flavors of Earth with the city's innovative synthetic methods, creating dishes that were not just food, but narratives, each bite a story of memory, resilience, and hope. The pain of confronting buried truths, of realizing centuries of lost emotional depth, was immense, but so was the exhilaration of rediscovery, of forging genuine, meaningful connections between previously isolated lives and minds. The hum of Neo Mumbai was no longer a drone of controlled order, but a vibrant, ever-changing symphony of connected minds, finally understanding the true power, and the true burden, of an unfragmented reality. In the humid, bustling heart of Neo Mumbai, the true spice of life was now the unpredictable, raw essence of human feeling, finally unleashed. Anise, the young chef who had tasted rebellion, watched as her city, once bland and controlled, finally remembered what it meant to truly live, to truly taste, and to truly feel. The future was unwritten, and that, she realized, was the most delicious prospect of all.